This is Rob Port from SayAnythingBlog.com. Surveillance drones. I have become part of our national lexicon for a while now. We've seen them be used overseas by our military in the various conflicts they're fighting over there. We've heard of them used in the war on terror to kill terrorists and things like that. But now they're being used here at home. Companies and law enforcement agencies across the nation have applied for permits to use surveillance drones at the University of North Dakota. There's going to be a surveillance drone study research going on at the Grand Forks Air Force Base. There's going to be a unit of drones deployed, and even the Grand Forks Sheriff's Department has applied for and received permission to use surveillance drones in their day-to-day or not their day-to-day activities, but they have them available to them to use. And obviously, I think for a lot of reasons, that's got members of the public concerned. How are these going to be used? Is it right that they be used? What are the privacy concerns? And a state leader here in North Dakota, Representative Becker, Rick Becker, is looking into this matter, and is it's something that's concerning him. And Rick, if I understand correctly, it was something that was brought to you by your constituents concerned over this. Is that where you're hearing a lot of these concerns?
Yeah, actually something I had been thinking about as well, and then I've heard some of the constituents raise their concerns as well, which sort of helps to underscore the importance, or at least the presence on people's minds as this technology is coming forth. Absolutely.
What exactly? I mean, the legislative session's next month. What do you have in mind for how, in terms of looking at this? Or are you looking at restrictions on their use, or what are your thoughts? What sort of policy can the state institute to address some of these concerns?
Well, now again, I'm a freshman legislator, so new at this. But the way I'm approaching is right now I'm just doing some research, and I'm planning to approach the Legislative Council shortly and look into how this could come about as a bill, and the different facets of what's going to all go into this. But right now, again, researching it, trying to figure out what might be best. And what I'm finding so far is it's really just, I guess, like any other technology that we could have overreach by the authorities into a person's private life. And the drones certainly have that capability. And there are going to be some masks that we can't really deal with as far as the feds, and the capabilities for their drones far exceeds what we could do on a state or local level. But we have to deal with what we can. And so that's going to be for the things that we've been reading about. I've been reading about how it's coming up, that you just mentioned it in Grand Forks and different programs for instituting the drones. And I think that drones are a great idea. They can be used in a very positive way, but we have to keep the restraints on their use. So I'm looking at putting forth a bill which would indicate that the drones could only be used for purposes of surveillance if there's a involvement with, for instance, violent crime or violent criminal, if a warrant is to be served on a violent criminal, or if there's actually a search warrant granted, much like we would require for any other type of, I guess, privacy intrusion. Another aspect, which seems maybe farther off, but I still think it's appropriate, would be to include in the bill that drones can't be weaponized, even if it's rubber bullets and so forth.
So essentially, under the legislation, and I know you're still very much in the development phase of this, but what you're foreseeing is if a law enforcement agency wants to use a drone in any instance, they would have to get a warrant?
Well, an instance where they're doing an investigation or surveillance, there would have to be a warrant. Now, if they're trying to apprehend a known criminal, they wouldn't need it. If they're looking for a missing person, they wouldn't need it. But I think we can come up with several situations where you wouldn't need to get a warrant. However, we would have to have the proviso that any data we're able to obtain with the use of the drone and not have had a search warrant can't be used in a court proceeding, something like of that nature. We would just really want to make it so that you can't have sort of random flying over your backyard barbecue and just check for, whether you're cooking your meat to the proper temperature.
Or maybe you're smoking a cigarette within 20 feet of a public building. I'm sorry,
Exactly.
but I digress. Well, I think what you're trying to do is strike a balance so that law enforcement has this tool, because I don't think a lot of us think it's very controversial if someone's little girl, little boy gets lost and we're trying to find them. The idea that we could cover a lot of ground trying to find this person with a surveillance drone, I think, is very appealing to people in that use. And I think most of us would want to have a drone available for that. If it could bring the little boy, the little girl home safer, or help us find that loved one safer, help save some lives quicker, I think we're all for that. What you're aiming more towards is the use for criminal investigations, to say, let's make sure that there's some checkpoints. If law enforcement wants to use this, the constitutional protections requiring a warrant apply. Is that an accurate way of summarizing this?
Yeah, that's a very accurate summary.
Now, have you heard it all? Because this is one thing that's concerned me, and I know we heard at the Grand Forks Sheriff's Department. Have you heard about what the cost of these things are? And not just in the drone itself, but it would seem to me it would take a significant amount of expertise to be able to use one. Is those costs going to be significant for law enforcement?
That's a really good question. I think that it would be very costly if you're looking at it with that old concept that when you have a hammer and that's all you have, everything looks like a nail. If they would want to use it for all sorts of things, between the actual drone, the equipment, the training of the people to fly them, and so forth, I think would be extremely costly. If you've got something where you've got a person who's been trained, for instance, if what you're doing is opting to use a drone and a well-trained drone pilot versus a helicopter, and you're looking at, okay, here we can save some money because we don't have a helicopter, or we don't want to keep a helicopter pilot on retainer, it could possibly be something that's a reasonable cost. But to have an abundance at every sheriff station of drones and drone pilots at the ready, I think would be pretty expensive. My understanding, with the little bit of reading I've been doing, is that they're fairly high tech machines, and proper training is absolutely required.
Well, I have a hard enough time using my television remote. I can't imagine trying to fly a little aerial thing miles and miles away. Clearly there's people with the expertise to do that, but I got to imagine that takes a lot of training and a significant amount of expense. Have you spoken to law enforcement about this legislation, or about what their feelings are? Obviously, the Grand Forks County Sheriff's Department's enthusiastic about getting it, and I do think that there's legitimate uses within law enforcement for this that I think most of us, again, when it's your child that's missing or it's your property that's missing, we all want that stuff back quickly. But I think there's other areas where law enforcement could use this that we're all concerned about it. Have you spoken to law enforcement about it?
I haven't, and that's a very good point. Before any bill would come out, I definitely want to speak to various law enforcement personnel, because, again, I'm a citizen legislator. I have concerns about privacy issues, about civil liberties. But since I am lucky enough to be in this position to hopefully affect some change, to look down the road and see where there might be concerns with new technologies, I want to do it in a very, wise or a manner which takes into account the pros and cons and thinks 1, 2, 3, 4 steps down the road. So in talking with the law enforcement folks, I'm hoping that I'll have further insight. I'm hoping that they'll be able to see that if a bill comes forward, and if it should pass, that it's not an attempt to squash the efforts of law enforcement to do good things. It's merely that as these new technologies come forward, we need to make sure that we keep them in check along with our rights.
Definitely. Well, Representative Rick Becker, thank you for your time, and I know we'll all be watching to watch your bill be introduced and watch the issue be debated as this rolls out. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Rob.